Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Richest Men in Town podcast. I'm Mike Freeman, and along with my good friend and co-host Tyler Gould, we're excited to welcome you to our little podcast project. Tyler and I are just a couple of middle-aged husbands and dads driven to live our best lives. We want to be better every day, so here we'll be sitting down with great people. Not famous people, but great people that we admire, to learn their secret to living the rich life. Probably not the rich life you're thinking of. Our guests come in humbled and surprised at the invitation and hopefully leave feeling proud and grateful, realizing just how good they really have it. So pull up a chair, stay a while, and raise a glass with us as we toast our guests to the richest men in town.
All right, Tyler Gould, here is the disclaimer. The Richest Men in Town podcast disclaimer is we don't have favorites. We don't have favorite guests. We've been doing this for a little bit, right? Season 3, season 4, working our way to 200 episodes. We don't have favorites, but we are starting to develop a VIP kind of relationship with one Brian Grow. We just had Brian on tonight. This is not his first rodeo. Man, that guy's rich. That guy drops it. What's sticking around after he's gone?
I mean, Brian's deep waters, man, and it's fun to talk to him because he's a thinker. And he's thinking about a lot of things all the time. And I love that about him. At one point, he talks about an exercise that he goes through about, writing down some things about what life could have been had things gone differently. And I mean, that was just such a cool thought, the way he put that together. But, Mike, he talks about the importance of conversations. He talks about differences. He talks about kind of the struggle that he's in right now in the stage of life with kids and everything else. And then he talks about the importance of struggle. And I just loved the way all of those sort of tie together. And then his answer about being rich was powerful.
Yeah, it's almost like a little focus group, right? Because we get into it. We get into it with all kinds of some things, like you said, there's some depth there. Mm-hmm. And it's just an interesting, fascinating season of his life where he's in. And I think part of us, we feel a little nostalgic as he's talking about, separating, fighting siblings.
Yeah.
and all of those things. And we love that. We love that struggle. But I think too, we get into like, hey, Brian, what's been moving in you as you've had a chance to listen into a couple of our guests? And that reflection and that really takes us to some places. And I think so many times in this work, we acknowledge the listener. Tonight in this episode, I think those acknowledgments are powerful.
Yeah.
Right. We try to exercise some empathy and some compassion for people that might be dealing with some things. And despite their best efforts, they're dealing with some things. And I think that conversation really took a rich turn.
Yeah. I think, Brian is just so insightful. And, you referenced at one point tonight, one of our conversations with our good friend, Kiefer Marino. And one of the things that his wife said to him, which was, who do you talk to? Who can you talk to? And I love that was a great question by his wife, but I really feel like the time that we had with Brian tonight, for me, it was just a great opportunity to talk to a good friend and get some great and hear some great words. Right. And I loved, I come away with every time I have a conversation with Brian with a list of things that I want to tweak a little bit and do things a little bit differently.
Yeah. Now I want to throw that invitation. There's a moment out there where I think you and I both are prompted to take some action on some things.
Yeah.
If that happens, if that happens across this world, as this message lands in people's ears, do that.
Yeah.
Take that action, right? Because I mean, I think that's something much, much bigger than our little podcast project happening in the lives of people. And I think there are just some players, right? Steph Curry has a green light, balls in his hands, he's shooting.
That's right.
Brian Grow, when it comes to this podcast, he's got a green light.
Amen.
Right? Anytime that guy says, "Hey, can I come on and shoot it with you?" Yeah.
Yeah.
Get in here. And 2 hours later, some rich things happen. So
yeah, we could have gone for 2 more. So it was a good time tonight.
yeah, always good to connect with you, and always good to have this midweek church, right? Have this opportunity for us to get real, right? And get into it and talk a little bit about maybe what we can be doing better. If anybody's wondering if this is polished, check out this episode, right?
Yeah.
This isn't polished.
This
is us doing work, and we're trying to get better. So, hey, do work, right? We're not done, and we're edified after our time. So I'm hoping as listeners tune in, thank you for your support, and we hope you do something with your time on this episode of The Richest Men in Town with Brian Grow. Okay, check this out, Tyler.
It's like a reunion.
Tyler, man, we usually do this thing totally different, but this guy has received VIP access. I think this is VIP access.
Yeah,
like we're not even front loading this guy. Brian Grow, welcome back to The Richest Men in Town, brother. How are you?
I'm great. How are you guys doing?
We're doing.
Yeah.
We got there's a lot of things happening in all three of our worlds right now, probably. So it's good to get together and chat.
Yeah, absolutely. We actually, I've in the last couple of months, I've been down into Tyler's neck of the woods. We were in San Diego for a conference, and then last week we were kind of a little further north, down visiting my parents. Went to Knott's Berry Farm and did the whole deal there. It was a blast.
I did Knott's a few weeks ago myself with my daughter.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
It's a fun time.
You know the standing invitation, man. The standing invitation is if you're within an hour, he's got your dinner.
Oh, is that?
Yeah, that's it. I think, it's funny because my brother-in-law, his rule is if you drive, he says, he who drives, no buy. Right. So if you're in town, you gotta, and someone shows up at your doorstep, you got to buy the dinner or the round of golf.
That's nice. I'll take dinner.
All right. Yeah. Okay.
Anger issues, golf. Yeah. don't need any of that.
Well, take your pick. Anger issues, golfing, or driving down in Southern California, right? I mean,
oh, well,
you're gonna
and it's funny because when we got back from this trip, one of my coworkers said to me, "Hey, you didn't have any car issues this time." We had an issue where we were in bumper to bumper traffic, and we had brakes starting to get hot and stuff like that. Luckily, we're out of that car and into a new one. But it is no joke. And trying to figure out where am I going to go from here?
Totally.
When you're in bumper to bumper and you're smoking on the side, like
you're a sketchy guy. Part of LA, and you're like,
it's not comfy.
Yeah,
you're that guy that everyone drives by and is like, oh, that sucks to be that guy.
Well, like people are like pointing at you, and they're like, "Yep, I'm aware. I can smell it."
That is hilarious. It's hilarious now, right?
Yeah, but I was also down in San Diego in May. I got to present at a conference for we eye care, and we have kind of an administrative portion of things, and we were a block away from Petco.
Oh, nice,
we were right down there at the convention center. That's where we were at. And I don't know if I've told you this. I think I have, but I was born in San Diego.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
My parents lived there until I was 4.
Okay.
And, over the course of that weekend, I felt really robbed. I felt really robbed that I didn't get to live more of my life in San Diego.
So were the Padres in town?
They were playing the Dodgers.
Oh,
nice. Shoot. Yeah. I was just at Petco on Friday night last week. The fam went to a game.
It's so fun.
Yeah. It was a good time.
Well, hey, you've got some exciting things happening, Brian, lately.
Yeah.
I mean, talk to me a little bit about the move, right?
Oh my goodness. I am recording from a new location. Usually I head down to my office and I'm just sitting in my office doing my thing. But we found a house. Luckily, we know we are very fortunate in this market, and I could do a whole podcast episode about the frustrations and the craziness of
I bet.
the housing market. But we were very fortunate to find a situation that allowed us to find a place with a spare room where we can make a studio. So I have this blank canvas behind me.
I love it, man.
And I see some gear behind Tyler. I see some gear behind Mike, some signs and things like that. So
yeah,
it's time to go shopping, I guess.
Yeah, man. I love it. That's
congratulations.
Exciting.
That is exciting.
Thank you. Yes, no, it's the best. We have a fenced in front yard, fenced in backyard, so the kids are contained, and that was a huge check off the list of things we needed. So now the question is, with the day we moved in, Gwen says to us, she goes, "So are we getting a dog today?" let's slow down for a little bit.
It's all those shoulds, man. It's all those shoulds these kids have these days.
Yeah.
Right? Well, once you get the house, you should get a dog. Like,
get a dog.
I don't know where these
yard
come from.
You got a fence. You might as well have a dog.
Might as well. I mean, I follow the logic. I get it. It makes sense to me too. So
are you a dog person, Brian?
I would love to have a dog. I would love to have, multiple. We have, one fun thing that we've done is we just, we always go back and forth, and every once in a while we'll get a spur of the moment. We'll just text a name to the other one of what we're going to name our dogs. And so we're going to name some after like fun characters like Ham from Toy Story.
Oh, sweet.
Or Bucky from, the Winter Soldier, so we have some fun names that we're coming up with.
That's awesome. So that means the dog is in the future.
Yeah. It sounds like it.
Yeah. I mean, once we kind of get settled, we're intentionally going a little slow with this just to hopefully purge a little bit more. Be a little more intentional with where we're putting things in the house. Cause I felt like the first house we had, we just kind of moved in and just put everything away.
Right.
And then, it kind of stayed there and wasn't as functional as we would have liked it.
Yeah.
So we're being intentional and kind of going through a lot of this stuff. We were living with my in-laws for 9 months. And so we're kind of going through a lot of stuff and going, we didn't miss this. Why are we holding on to it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting stage. And, I mean, that it could be a metaphor, right? When we have the big things happen in our life, what do we not miss? What can we put away? What can we put to the side? What can we purge?
Man, I agree with that, man. I think that we've had this conversation before on the podcast just about getting rid of debris, right? We probably had that conversation with you, Brian, but just getting rid of debris in our lives. And there is some, I actually love the process of getting rid of stuff.
Yeah,
I really do. But my wife, we're opposites there. She's like, I'm like, yeah, that's a cool picture. I mean, but he's 25 now. Like, he drew that when he was 3. You know what I mean? Like, what are we gonna do with that bad boy? So, and I think maybe there's a balance there. But I'm like, nope, we haven't used it. We're chucking it, man. We don't need it. So,
isn't that interesting though? You battle, you kind of wage this battle with stuff your whole life. You earn money to buy stuff. When you're young, you accumulate stuff. As you get older, you hate stuff and you purge stuff. Right? It's like, why do we fill our lives with stuff? There's this urge to get more stuff. And I think that sometimes a move like what Brian's going through or just went through is a cool opportunity to kind of disrupt that.
Yeah.
Right. To literally say and do that life-changing magic of tidying up thing where it's like, does this bring me joy? See you later, right?
But I will say the weird thing about it is, so when we did our last big move, when we moved from Redding down to San Diego, we got rid of a ton of stuff. In fact, I had a dumpster brought to the house. We just filled that thing up, and I was giving stuff away to people. All this stuff. I selling stuff.
Thanks for the mower.
Yeah, no problem, man. and we get down here. And I felt really good. I'm like, dude, we got rid of a lot of stuff. And now I look in the garage and I'm like, what? It's like we just filled it right back up.
Yeah. Hey, let me ask you this. Do you use your garage as a garage?
How define how you should use the garage?
Do you park your car?
No.
Is any automobile parked?
There is no automobile in the garage.
Yeah.
And that's mostly because when the kids were younger and at home, it was like ping pong, darts, right? So it's kind of set up that way.
Living space a little bit.
Yeah.
Recreation.
Right, recreation. But now it's like recreation / I don't know what, man. It's kind of like my side yard.
Yes. Well, I was just going to bring that up. I have a side yard now, and there's already a washing machine in it.
What happens? I just got a barbecue in my side yard. What just happened?
It's so funny because the other day I have been doing some work in the garage trying to get rid of some stuff and clean it up. And so what's happened is I have this pile on my side yard that I have to have someone come and haul it away. I almost snapped a picture of it and texted it to you guys because I was like, this is a couple of days ago. I'm like, man, my side yard is out of hand.
Everyone's got a side yard.
Yeah.
Well, if anybody needs a washing machine, it still works. It still runs and everything. So if anybody's in the Reading area and wants a free washing machine, come and get it.
Yeah, there we go.
We'll throw that out there. Hey, I can talk side yard for a second. I gentlemen, actually rented and operated my first jackhammer the other day.
Wow.
Yeah. Like my Manly account in Kelly Freeman's bank right now is swollen because I've done some manly things.
That means you not only rented it, but you operated it correctly.
Yeah. Hey, I actually had small engine repair. We had a mower, not yours. Your mower has since dead and gone, but we had a mower.
Pour some out.
We had a mower die, and I actually bought a part on eBay. This episode brought to you by eBay Lawnmower Parts. And I replaced the part, pulled the cord, started it up, and you should have seen the look of pride on my wife's face. It's remarkable. But so check this out, right? So the other day, my fence collapses. I lose a post.
Okay.
Post is compromised. And I go to remove the post, and I swear the person that dug the post was also the same guy that poured the foundation, because the post and the foundation are like welded together with just a huge lump of concrete.
All right.
So Abe and I do our best efforts, consult YouTube, try to figure out how to pull out a concrete footing. Can't get it. Go to Ace Hardware, rent a jackhammer, man. Jackhammer that thing out. The next morning, I'm ready for the pour. My hole is filled with water.
Oh, yeah.
My neighbor had a failed drip and had been hitting my house for months.
Oh, which
and that's the
made your
water
post
that killed the
rotted out.
post.
Yeah.
And so I invite her over for her to help me discover this.
Oh, this is the reveal with the neighbor. How's this go down?
I bailed out the water. I'm like, can you run through your sprinkler? I think we got some situation here. And she's like, awesome. Thanks for bringing that to my attention. She plugged the drip and left me to, continue to do the work. And there was no talk of maybe helping out with the cost of things. So I just said, awesome. Thanks. Have a good day.
You know what you do? You just run that jackhammer for a few extra hours. Hey, I got to do this jackhammering at 10 o'clock at night. I don't know what to tell you. This is how it goes. So,
but there is you talk about life lessons there, right? The frustration of digging out a footing 2.5 feet deep. And the purpose of that deep footing was to secure that post, and surface water took out the post, right? I think a lot of times we think we have this deep spiritual footing and we're good. And we don't necessarily look around and look at some of the elements that might be damaging some things, right? I tried to convey that to my kid, to my 18-year-old, but I think he was just like, I don't know what Dad's talking about.
So he's going to be dropping that in Portuguese in a few months anyway. So
it's set and it's good there.
It is set. It was quite a challenge.
Did you christen it with the slap? And that's not going anywhere.
Because it might go somewhere.
Yeah, it's at a 23-degree angle now.
Well, that's what you got to do. You got to do that now, because then it's set. That's how you keep it from happening again. Yeah. That's not going anywhere.
So hey, on the subject of teaching kids, Brian, you've got little guys. We're not necessarily in the little guy business, and I just wanted to share something out. Tyler and I are doing some work with this book right here, How Will You Measure Your Life, by Clayton Christensen. Richest Men in Town, stay tuned. We'll be doing some things with this down the road. But yeah, if we could, I just want to share this thought with you. Brian, and then you can kind of let me know how this is landing with you as a father of young children. All right.
Okay. Sounds great.
Here's the deal. He's got a friend, right? Jim and Norma. They've raised some great kids. He has this conversation. He's like, hey, how did you raise such great kids? This is what Jim and Norma said. When the kids come home for a family reunion, I like to listen to their banter back and forth about the experiences they had growing up and which had the greatest impacts on their lives. I typically have no memory of the events they recall as being important. And when I asked them about the times when Jim and I sat them down specifically to share what we thought were fundamental or foundationally important values of our family, well, the kids have no memory of them. I guess the thing to learn from this is that children will learn when they are ready to learn, not when we're ready to teach them. And then the author, Clayton Christensen, says this: your parents most likely weren't thinking consciously about teaching you the right priorities at the time, but simply because they were there with you in those learning moments, those values became your values too, which means that first, when children are ready to learn, we need to be there. And second, we need to be found displaying through our actions the priorities and values that we want our children to learn. When they're ready to learn, we better be there, and it won't be words. Right? So, Brian, your kids, as you think about that, what's moving in you as you hear that?
Yeah, I think of it on a couple fronts, because I just got an opportunity to sit down with family, my parents, and as we do so, we converse about the things that we remember from childhood and experiences, and that is exactly the conversation is, I don't remember that. I don't remember saying that. I never said that.
These seminal things, right?
No, I do not. All those things. So,
Yeah.
so I have lived that. I experience it. Yeah, that is so fascinating to me, because I think the world we live in now and what we like is order and schedule and fitting things in nicely and neatly. And that to me is not a linear start here, get here. I don't think raising kids is an objective that you can stack, like, okay, mile marker 1, 2, 3, 4, and we go from A to Z, and all of a sudden, great, we have great kids now. It's very much an organic process, and there's going to be moving forward and moving back, and a new variable enters the picture, and that's chaos. And I think when you try to control chaos, you get pulled in a lot of the time, and you get shook around in a way that if you kind of allowed yourself to just kind of take it moment by moment. And I had just before we got on tonight, I had a child say to me, "I'm not talking to you, and I never will again." And I remember an experience the first time something like that happened, and I don't love you, or one of those things happened, and it sunk me the first time. And tonight it was just like, okay, that's all right. So he went into his room. He was in his room for a little while. After a little while, I knock on the door, and I sit down and talk, and we had to separate some kids for fighting and things like that. And we just, we had a little 2-minute chat just talking about, like, hey, what's not okay? It's not okay when we're angry. You got to recognize when you're angry, and you got to know that it's not okay to cross certain lines and things like that. So it's a small little conversation. And I have no idea, like you've pointed out here, if he's ever going to remember talking about that, about a boundary, about talking about trying to recognize when we're getting frustrated, upset, and kind of not letting that go into an action, go into behavior that is not okay. But yeah, it's all about the continuous contact. the continuous. I don't know. I don't know exactly because I'm in the middle of it, and
Well, and,
it's
and
just chaos.
Christensen's concern is the outsourcing.
Sure.
I
And
think
if
it's
we
the
outsource it,
repetition.
we're not there.
Yeah, I think it's the repetition, right? It's like the reality is, and I agree, like you don't know when that lesson's going to hit, right? And so, but that doesn't mean the lesson's not important, right? So it's the repetition of that lesson. And I think that it's the modeling of the principle that, you know, ultimately has the biggest impact.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that I would imagine, and in fact, you know, I have 3 of my kids home from college right now. And we were just at dinner and they were sharing stories. And some of those you're like, whoa, that wasn't our best moment, but yeah, we survived. But, you know, I think it's the modeling of those, of those principles that has the biggest impact, because my kids will, you know, they'll point stuff out now that Ricky and I have done more than they'll point stuff out that Ricky and I have said. Right. So yeah, but I do think those conversations are critical anyway.
Usually when they're pointing out what you say, it's because you've said something opposite of what you've done. And they said,
yeah,
because there's been a few times where, you know, I've been saying something over and over and they go, wait, Dad, didn't you say?
Right. Yeah. Right.
Oh,
yeah.
Dang it. You're right. I did say that. And I made a wrong choice, or, you know, whatever it is.
Right.
And then you have that conversation. But yeah, I think that's the other part of it too, is not making yourself such a figure that's infallible to these kids. I think that's a huge part of it, being able to tell them like, yep, I messed up. I did something wrong. I'm still working. I'm still trying. I'm still growing. I'm still striving, all those kinds of things. And I think that really teaches them, you know, it's okay when mistakes happen, but we also know what to do when those mistakes happen. Then we move forward. Because I mean, this world is too chaotic. And if I'm trying to think what my kids are going to be dealing with when they're in my shoes, 25, 30 years down the line, you know, there's going to be things in the world that I can't even imagine happening at that time. We go back to when I was their age, that was a completely different world than it is now.
Yeah.
And, you know, you give them some guiding principles. And I think that's
same game. Yeah.
That's a big part of it.
Those guiding principles, it's the same game, right? We can lose our minds about what is coming. We can lose our minds about what their reality will be, but it is the same game. You know, ancient ancestors played by the same rules that we should be playing by.
Sure.
The game is maybe intensified in the pace, but you know, I think a successful life then, a successful life now, a successful life down the road is going to be built on the same foundational principles.
Well, and I think, you know, if we're thinking about like raising good kids, like I think it's just instilling in them that no matter what happens, we can get through stuff. Like no matter what happens, we can overcome stuff. We can learn new things. We can deal with things as they come. We can repent. We can change. I think that's a huge piece, because then it gives you that peace of mind that, you know, I'm going to be working, I'm going to be growing, but if I mess up, there's still a path. There doesn't have to be the shame and despair that stops me. That fractures relationships, that makes us, you know, it's being able to quickly shake off the I hate you, you're ruining my life, and all those kinds of things. Or when a parent is wrong in their discipline and in my overreactions and things like that, that we can get through anything, no matter what it is.
I think Clayton Christensen gets into this idea, and Tyler, we've kind of joked about family mottos, right? Mission statements, but he does get into this idea of a family culture, and things. And Brian, the things that you just kind of shared would be pieces of the Grow family culture, and the Goulds have a culture, and the Freemans have a culture, but that culture is what's going to raise those children, right? And so when we talk about wanting to raise strong children that are, you know, resilient and they're faithful and those kinds of things have to be elements that are in a culture. And whether you are intentional about a culture or not, don't fool yourself. One is being created.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, okay. So I have been
Yeah.
I have been talking about this a lot recently. So this presentation that I did down in San Diego was about retaining employees. The title of it was employee retention, creating a psychologically safe workplace, and that's a huge thing that we talked about. We talked about how a workplace culture, it's kind of like a garden, and if you're not tending to it, stuff is still going to grow, but you're not necessarily going to like the things that are growing. And there's going to be things. And I think when we use phrases like toxic workplace or a toxic environment, a lot of the times that conjures up images of somebody being malicious, somebody being highly inappropriate, somebody being just as mean as they possibly can be. But I think more often the case is people are focused on the things that they need to get done, and we don't give the time and attention to some of these other things. And a lot of it is just not tended. We're not cultivating the ground to bring forth good things. We're not putting the right things into the ground to sprout up the fruits that we want. We're just letting it be, and whatever comes oftentimes. And those things are usually the prickly thing, is the poisonous thing, is those things that we don't want.
Yeah, it's that whole right. No, making no decision is a decision, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I agree. I with family, man, I feel like the culture is going to develop. Like Mike, you're 100% right. It's going to develop one way or the other, right? If you're not putting in the effort to steer the ship in some way, you're going to be out to sea, right? So, yeah,
but I think
talk about
the
this
cool
stuff
thing,
all the time.
Yeah, the cool thing about that culture, though, in your home or in your family, is when it's established, it checks itself. Like, for example, my kids and I were in the car. Kelly's in the car. We're traveling, and I was going to say the aux cord. These cars don't have aux cords anymore, right? Grace is driving the Bluetooth, and a song comes up in like the first line. She's on Spotify. I got the free Pandora, right? So she's upgraded to Spotify, but I have concerns because sometimes Spotify explicit stuff comes through, right? Well, all of a sudden something comes through and she's like, boom, changes it. Sorry, Dad. Right? And it's like, that's it. But 4 years ago, that might've been a verbal, hey, well, we don't do that.
Right.
Or 5 years ago, and it's turned into something else. But if you don't do the hey, we don't do that, 5-6 years down the road, passively stuff happens, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
If that is intended, you're gonna have it. Either you can be intentional about it, and still, if people have agency. I'm not saying that family culture is the end all be all for this. This is how you raise strong families, but it's a very important piece to it for sure.
Yeah, and it's oftentimes conversations that just sometimes aren't had. You have to be intentional with being like, hey, can we as a family talk about what's okay, what's not okay, what's okay to watch? What should we say? Okay, this is the line that if this happens in something I'm watching or listening to, or in a situation with friends, that I'm pulling a plug, that I'm leaving, that I'm choosing to do something different. If we don't kind of navigate and discuss where lines are in anything, in a relationship, then things are going to happen. And when a lot of the times, the worst time to deal with something, especially when we get high emotion or things like that, the worst time to decide what you're going to do is right when it happens, right? So if we have those conversations beforehand and something happens, then we go, we've already had this conversation. We've already thought through this and logically have kind of said, we know why we're not going to do this. And so we don't have to rely on ourselves to make the right decision in a high emotional state, or an emotional state that is going to lead us to anger or into lust or into, whatever the case may be. We can fall back on those things that we've already talked through, that we've already thought through the process.
That's where I'm That's where I'm eternally grateful for the gospel of Jesus Christ, right? For those principles, for the doctrine of Christ, where we can exercise faith and we can repent, and that's for all of us, moms, dads included, right? And the better that we can model that, how cool would it be is if in your family culture, this idea like, hey, we repent and we make it right, right?
You know, I totally agree. And I just, you know, I know people that have, and we're probably all going to be there at some point, right? But, you know, there's a lot of people that are doing everything the right way, modeling the right things. They're having these crucial conversations, right? They've made these decisions about what's right, what's wrong, what's good, what's bad, what's healthy, what's not, right? And it's become part of this building or emerging family culture. And then you have that person that says, I reject this family culture. I reject this. Like, I don't fit into this. I'm moving, you know, it's just not where I'm at. And so what's the answer to that, Mike Freeman?
Oh man. Can I jump in before you do?
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
You'll get the maybe wrong answer, and then Mike will come in with the right
Nah.
one.
No. I don't even know if I have an answer to that.
So my overwhelming impression after 8 years of being a father is they're still on loan to me, right? And that they have another father who is there, who is going to be there for them. And it is not, I mean, it's my place to encourage, but at that point, I think it's just love. It's love, and you let grace do its work, right?
Yeah.
You keep people close, you keep lines of communication open, because you never know when that influence is going to be the thing that they're in need of.
Yeah.
I
agree with that. I totally agree with that. Cause I think that, you know, it's interesting, right? You have this, we're having this conversation. I love the conversation about just families and how do we foster this positive and resilient culture. Right. And I'm sure there's people listening that are like, yeah, I've done that and it just ain't working. You know what I mean? Like, I've given it my all, and it's a 30 car pile up behind me.
Yeah.
So,
And I think some of the,
I think Brian's right, by the way.
Yeah,
I totally am all in on what you just said, Brian. I'm 100%.
I agree, because I think that keeps the door open.
Yeah.
Right. That door's got to be open. That bridge has to be there for them in their wilderness to come home.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And as a parent, like, that's got to be priority one. Keep that door open. Make sure that home is a place where they can come and feel love, because that is the language of heaven. Right. But I'm gonna pivot a little bit and come back to it. Last night I'm watching the ESPYs and I'm getting choked up and emotional. ESPYs kill me. Liam Hendricks gets the Jimmy V, right, award for perseverance, and he's a closer for the White Sox. And they find some lumps in his neck, and turns out he's been pitching with stage 4 non-Hodgkin's B-cell lymphoma, probably for over a year. Right, he goes into chemo and he beats it. And he gets this acceptance speech, and in the acceptance speech, so I lost somebody that I love with all my heart to non-Hodgkin's B-cell lymphoma. And so I'm hearing him in his acceptance speech, and he's talking about with family and with faith, it's a mind thing, and you can beat anything. And I'm thinking kind of like Tyler, what you're thinking about, what maybe listeners might be experiencing, listening to this, right? Yeah. And I'm thinking, brother, I love you, but there was plenty of heart, and there's plenty of faith, and there's plenty of mental strength and fortitude, and we lost, right? Stuart Scott, in his acceptance speech, talks about we don't lose our battle with cancer, right? And I want to respect that. But like, I think that there's just part of the plan is there's going to be something, wayward children, diagnosis. There's going to be something. Part of the faith game is this idea of waiting on the Lord. Somebody somewhere in this journey is going to have something unanswered, is going to have something that they're carrying, is going to have a thorn in the flesh that won't go away, right? There's going to be something in this mortal experience where we're waiting on the Lord. We're praying for that kid. We're praying for those kids. We're praying for that 30-car pileup, right? We're praying that those things will be made right. And I will always remember the words of Kent Wiseman talking about the mercy, that we're just underestimating the mercy and the love of God, especially when it comes to wayward children. And we're just not necessarily giving enough maybe credence to that atonement that Jesus Christ performed.
I mean,
there's going to be a power
absolutely
there.
And that's a tough spot, man. I mean, you think like, I think there's, and maybe it's appropriate, Brian, that you're here with us tonight, because I think it was you, the three of us had a discussion, and you talked about holding two things at once, right? And I think that's such a powerful thought, and because I think there's a notion that in order for me to support the one I love, who maybe is in a place that their choices are not congruent with my beliefs, I have to maybe abandon that to show that love, right? Like it's almost like this solidarity, right? Out of solidarity, I love my child or this person, therefore I'm going to walk away from this thing that has been good for me because it's maybe not seemingly congruent with where they're at. And I just love that idea that we can hold both things, right? Mike, I think what you said is beautiful. I think that's a 100% it. And, between the two of you, you've solved the riddle, I think, right? It's, we show love and then we allow grace to kind of do its thing. And I mean, that's powerful, because I know people that are in that spot that have said, you know what, these two things can't coexist. And so I'm going to make the choice for my loved one and abandon this other thing.
Well, and I think that too, like, can we make sure that we clarify and qualify when Brian talks about love? Because a love that is designed to, like, I'm going to win them back through love, that's not what we're talking about.
Right.
That's a condition for sure.
That's a grooming, right?
Yeah.
That's I'm going to love you, and I've got this motive, I've got this agenda, and I need you to believe what I believe. That's not what we're talking about. And I think that there's a really cool scripture sequence that I can't kind of kick out of my head. I heard it in a speaker in church a couple of days ago. So it's in Moroni 8, and he talks about this sequence. So check out this sequence. In verse 25, and the first fruits of repentance is baptism. Baptism cometh by faith unto the fulfilling the commandments, and the fulfilling the commandments bringeth remission of sins. So faith, repentance, baptism brings on this obedience, leads to a remission of sins, and the remission of sins bringeth meekness and lowliness of heart. And because of meekness and lowliness of heart cometh the visitation of the Holy Ghost, which comforter filleth with hope and perfect love. So many times we're thinking, man, I got to get more love in my life. And we're not necessarily going upstream and understanding, unlocking the sequence. You want perfect love in your heart? You want to forgive people? You want to have love towards people that maybe even persecute us or use us? It goes back to have faith, repent, baptism, or I think of the sacrament, renewing my baptismal covenants, and then be obedient, right? I mean, Tyler, in some text leading up to it, you were talking about this idea of sacrifice. Like, those are the things that are going to turn up. Like, man, I got a cold heart towards some people. I need an outpouring of this. Just work that sequence.
Sequence. And I think the key is, right, that when we find ourselves in those spots, and I'll just talk from personal experience, like you double down on the work on yourself, right? You double down on the work on yourself. And it's like the reflection becomes not how do I change these people or these circumstances that might be influencing these people, but how do I change myself, right?
Okay,
how
Tyler,
do I become a softer, right? Where I can feel that and I can convey that unconditional love, Brian, right?
Yeah, but
Rather
can
than
we put a highlighter on that, because listeners are going to hear that, and that is counterintuitive. You just said, in order for me to have a desire to change others, I got to double down on myself.
And most of the time that's just being willing to be open and listening and hearing, right, to understand somebody else's perspective.
Yeah.
And not accepting it, not changing your whole personal philosophy, like you kind of were pointing out, Tyler, but being able to say, okay, from here, where do we go? What's going on with, you start asking them questions about, okay, well, talk to me about your connection to heaven. Do you feel severed there? Do you feel like, what's your thought there? You just get inquisitive. And, this is another big mental thing we talked about, replace judgment with curiosity. I think that's a very, you talked about humble meekness, those kinds of things. That is, in my mind, one of the most humble mindsets that we can have, is to just be curious about the things. The best scripture studies I have, the best prayers that I offer are ones in which I'm curious when I'm going through a situation and I really want to dig in and have my mind changed in different ways. You're open to that revelation. Without that, that's when we get closed-minded and hard-hearted, is when we say, you know what? And I think the hard part about it is when we have somebody so close to us choose something so vastly different than what we choose, there's almost like this sense of loss for us. A lot of people, I read a book recently, it was a while ago, about a mother who had a son who came out to them, and she talked about how, all of a sudden she had this feeling of like, oh, well, we're not going to be able to see them in the temple, and grandchildren, is that ever going to happen? And all those kinds of things. And it went to a very, very much like, oh, look what I've lost. Look what I'm suffering in. And oftentimes that can kind of grow into a, well, I'm going to have to, the only way that I can end this hurt is to sever the relationship and to just let things go. And I think if we're able to, just get curious and to,
but I think, Brian, that curiosity though, that edifies both.
Yeah.
Right. So Tyler,
that shows so much love and care.
You've shared conversations you've had with people that have challenges and struggles, and as you're doing that, and you're expressing genuine curiosity, and in that spirit of a not an agenda, but just charity, right? Just that perfect love. Not that we're perfect, but we walk away edified. Both parties walk away edified, right? If we do that right, we walk away with some compassion. We walk away with some understanding of what people are dealing with. And when I think of being Christ-like, that's nail on the head, right? Christ understood what everyone has been dealing with because he felt and carried that. Mm-hmm. And so as we're in those places, serving and just trying to help and understand, maybe help other people through their challenges, sharing some of our experiences, we're going to walk away edified. We're going to walk away.
Yeah.
Better.
And I think I just really, I've talked to a lot of people, especially recently, and it's like almost like those two things can't be together. You know what I mean? And I just don't feel that way, man. I feel like if that they should be, right? I just think about that conversation we had with Rachel Spencer, right? And she says to us, I think, Mike, you asked the question, why didn't you leave? Right. And she says,
One of
well,
the all-time best answers.
yeah, he never left me. And so they should coexist, because, right, we're all struggling with something. And gosh, if it wasn't for grace, where would we be? Right.
And what good is our faith if we
existence.
don't allow the uncertainty to live there and take the steps forward, not knowing what to do?
Yeah.
And that is so not 2023, right?
Yeah.
Where you can pull out a phone and know the capital of any country. You can know any possible thing that you ever wanted to know. The idea of like, hey, be okay with not knowing something.
Yeah.
Is like that fries our bacon right now, right? Like we can't handle that, but that's the game. That's what faith is. And I think I love what Tyler, what you just shared, because I think we talk about keeping that door open at home. You know, be mindful if people are feeling like this false dichotomy, like I got to choose my loved one or my faith, and I choose my loved one. He didn't close any door.
Yeah.
That door's still, grace
100%.
keeps that door wide open.
Yeah.
Right. So you might be thinking you're making this really hard choice. That door's always open.
Yeah.
Which is a comforting thought for me, right? Because we've all made those choices.
100%. Yeah, absolutely.
We've all chosen them.
It's heavy, but I mean, I can't think of anything better to help us grow and understand and learn than to mourn with those that mourn and comfort those that stand in need of comfort, and to be there and to just sit with people through things, and to do our best to say, you know, yep, I don't agree, but I love you. And that doesn't change the way that I'm going to interact with you, the way that I'm going to show up for you and
100%.
show up with you. Yeah.
I mean, I've literally had this conversation where I've just said, you know what? I don't know the answer to that. I wish I did, but I don't. But I love you. You know, still the same. That didn't change. We don't know the answers, but.
Well, tomorrow night I'm tasked with going to a regional YSA conference, you know, and having a testimony meeting and representing stake presidency and fielding questions from young single adults, right? And so you're like, oh boy, 2023, young single adults, people 18 to, 30 years old, and they get to raise their hand and ask me any question. There's going to be some of those. It's a great question, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think
I'm going to pull Bednar's trick and just be like, hey, let's share some scriptures and then take that to God. Right.
Well, I'll tell you, I think that there's a lot of, I just think that can be a powerful statement to say, I don't know the answer to that, but we can do some digging ourselves, and we can put some work and some effort into that and maybe gain some sort of clarity, but there's not an answer, right? There's a lot of things that are not answerable right now.
Well, I'm going to owe you a nickel or two, because I'm going to use, I remember a conversation that you had with somebody that was struggling. And you said, isn't that cool that you're struggling with it?
Yeah.
Like, isn't that cool that you're here with me having this conversation, and you are striving to seek out something.
The struggle means you're doing the work, right?
Yeah. Versus the yield, right? Just like, oh, this got hard, I'm out,
right?
Mm-hmm.
But same thing if you say, well, I'm questioning my faith. Good.
That means you
questioning
care.
means we're doing some work,
Mm-hmm.
Let's dig for the answers.
Because
But
the
if we
bro
just
in
said,
the pew next to you hasn't questioned it for a decade.
Yeah.
right. Right, exactly. I love it. So, Brian, it's been a little bit, man.
Yeah, it's been a while.
It's been a little while. We've run through a few conversations since we've last been together.
You know what I love about Brian, Tyler?
Yeah.
And I don't know if he's got something in his pocket, but he's usually good at throwing a question at us.
He does. Yeah. That's why I'm trying to keep this thing moving along so nothing gets thrown our way.
I see. Well, to wrap up that last conversation with a little bow, it's going to be a lot easier to be on this podcast because you're going to ask me any question. You're, you know what? I don't know the answer to that. It's going to be a lot more boring for people. But
that's not acceptable in this format.
Oh,
all right?
shoot. Dang it.
People are going to be angry. They're going to be mowing their lawn, waiting for Tyler's words of wisdom, and he's just going to say, "I don't know. That's a really good question."
I don't know.
That's a great
question.
Quit.
Yep.
So anyway,
You're
moving on
gonna
to the
pull
next
their
topic.
Stomp them on the ground and be like, "These guys don't know squat."
And that's true.
That is true.
I'm comfortable in that
absolutely,
spot.
Yeah, we
But
never
I'm-
claim to know anything.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Well,
I'm curious,
and I think-
Brian. Go ahead.
No, I think that some of the best advice is like, stop looking so much for advice and just like live and experiment and do the best that you know how, and think through stuff and learn and say, nope, that didn't work. We're going to try something new. We're going to try something different. I think really that is kind of an art that's being lost a little bit. So much I find myself doing it all the time. Like, I don't know how to do something or I don't know a mindset. And my first place is to go to Google and start searching and reading articles and things like that. Instead of just going, let me think through this. Let me pray through this a little bit. Let me figure, let's put a game plan together. Let's try it. That didn't work.
I like that, Brian. It made me, as you were talking, it made me think of, experimenting on the word.
Yeah.
Right. I think that there's this idea that, hey, if we don't have the answer immediately, then the answer doesn't exist. Well, maybe it's that we're not asking the right questions. We're not putting in the right amount of work. We're not looking at it from a different angle. Right. Mm-hmm. Like, how do we, begin to, I think that's how we begin to become experts in recognizing how God speaks to us.
Well,
right?
here's the interesting thing.
I love that, Tyler, because as we're studying the New Testament, right? If someone is expecting it to all be rolled out,
yeah,
like you believe in Jesus Christ and I want everything rolled out, then you don't know how he worked with his disciples.
Right. Yeah.
Right. You don't know necessarily how God gives that line upon line, precept upon precept, so that there's some reliance so that we check back in. Right. Imagine his apostles upon leaving them, and they're like, what do we do?
Yeah.
Right. The New Testament, the record is filled with people trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
So why, if God is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow, why in 2023 are we expecting this blueprint? Right.
Yeah.
That we're like A to Z. This is how I'm going to live my life because I've accepted Jesus Christ and I have faith, and by golly, he's going to answer everything and roll it out for me. It's not necessarily how it works.
No,
well, and I think the struggle is what drives it from just being a head thing. Because there's some of my frustrations with myself is like, I know things. I know better. You hear that all the time. You know better. And I do.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things in my life that I know better, and I choose not to do it. And sometimes I think the way it's because it's just staying there in my head. I haven't gone through a struggle enough to move that thing mentally into my heart or into my hands or into my feet. I think the struggle gets it into part of our being, and not just like, oh, how do I deal with this situation? Go to the internet. Okay, that's an interesting article. Okay, cool. Maybe I'll do something about it. Maybe I won't. But I think when we give ourselves okay, let me think through this. Let me struggle. Let me try something. Let me have a conversation. Let me discuss. I think that's when it gets past this mental barrier into other parts, and we actually are moved forward and changed through that process.
I agree. I love that idea of the struggle, right? Struggling through it, I think is important. I was just having this conversation with one of my daughters recently. I was up at school, and she, was having a tough time, and she's like, I've been praying about this, and I don't think I'm getting an answer, and then it was like, well, let's talk through what that process has looked like, and let's talk through where the thoughts and the feeling that you've had through this process. And let's talk about some of those thoughts and feelings, and how have they lined up with, the thought, the solution to the problem that you think, right? So there's this, I think the rediscovery of how we receive promptings, revelation, answers, right? I think is it's ongoing. because I think there's a need for us to continually be struggling to fine tune how we hear, right? And I think lose that a lot. So
yeah, I think we talked before. You come to him with two options. Here's A, here's B, and he's like, "What about G?"
right. Yeah.
We sometimes we put limits on an unlimited God.
Well, and there's that whole. Go ahead, Brian. Yeah.
Are you sure?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Go ahead.
So I was just going to say, I think we can equate struggle with any time we're out of our comfort zone, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the only place we grow. Staying in our comfort zone is a recipe to stagnate, to stay the same. Getting out of our comfort zone is struggle, is something new. And then our comfort zone expands. I think about things like, speaking in church. It was surprising to me recently, having people say, "Yeah, no, I don't speak in church." when you ask them to
decline the offer,
and you're like, "Oh, wow, interesting." And I go, "Oh, I guess so." I've had opportunities in my life to be able to do that and to get to a place where there was a time where I would have done the same thing, that I didn't want to speak in church, and it was an uncomfortable thing. But I was able to, through help from parents and mentors and asking questions, figure out how to get myself to a place where that's not a thing that I worry about anymore. When somebody says, "Hey, can you speak to this class? Can you speak to this group?" Like, I'm okay with that now because of opportunities. And because of struggles, because sometimes I've gone up and really just been awful. Actually, it's funny, when I left on my mission, and when I got back, I spoke with the same person that both times, a guy in my ward. And when I got back, he said to me, he was all like, "That was so much better than your first one." and there's opportunities, there's opportunities for us to get up and bomb and not do a good job. Like I look back on the things that I talked about when I left on my mission, and I'm a little embarrassed. I go, "Yeah, that was not great." But from that, I go, "Okay, what could have made that better? Why did that bomb? What was so bad about that?" And I think whenever we are struggling with something, if we're willing to do that and get out of our comfort zone, to try new experiences, to fail at those experiences, and then be able to say, "Yeah, I want to do that again," or be like, "Yeah, that's not something, like, I guess that's not something for me." I mean, we can have this conversation. We can go through this process.
Yeah.
But I think the task didn't change.
Yeah.
Your capacity changes. And I think sometimes we look at this hard thing and our capacity is static in our minds, right? We don't see a future self that has increased ability to do things. We think, "Oh, that's hard and I can't do it." That might be very true right now. That might be hard and you can't do it, but the can't isn't the same today as your ability tomorrow, right? There's an increase. And I think if we don't factor that in, I think a lot of the opportunities actually for growth are disguised as hard things. And if we don't say yes to some of those hard things, we're going to become complacent, right? We're going to become static. We're not going to grow. And if anything,
we're going
to atrophy.
Go for it. Yeah. Go chase struggle.
Yeah. Well, I think about Mike, about Justin, Dr. Justin's story, right? And just this idea of, a commitment to this thing that was good, that had opposition at every turn, right? And it was like, but what I really appreciated about that was his ability, and this is one of the big things I took away from our time with him, was the ability to recognize what seems like a small, maybe innocuous event that is seminal in your progression, right? And he really details this idea that if we have faith that there's something good that'll come through this struggle, that God's hand will be in the middle of it, right?
Yeah,
and I think that we lose that, right?
I'm handing out Dr. Justin Mudikarez's episode like candy here in Redding, California, because I think that there's so many truths there.
Yeah.
I think one of the thoughts that I had, I was just listening to something. The musician Bono was talking about some of his world causes, and he says, "Oh, so you got passions?" And he asked this question: "What actions do your passions lead you to do?"
Right.
And when I heard that, I immediately saw Dr. Justin's face, right?
Yeah.
Because he's in these situations where he's passionate about his country, he's passionate about freedom, about all of those things, and he's had these experiences in life that have urged him to do something about it. You feel this thing? Do something about it.
Well, and
I think
love
so many times we might feel it, but we don't. It's a 1-2 punch, and if we don't do the something about it, there it went.
Yeah, and what does he say? Like he talks about an experience he had in prayer, and the answer that he received, routine prayer. Right, you're right. And the answer that he receives is, "What are you going to do?" Right? It wasn't like, "Go do this thing," or here's the answer that you need. It was, "What are you going to do?" And then, all right, let me get off my knees here and do
and
something.
Again, that's
right?
that's evidence that he doesn't just roll it out.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, and
go see this guy, get blessed by this guy, then do this, and then it's like,
we see that in the life of the Savior too. Like that what you just said is like, what are you going to do? Like that is our Heavenly Father being curious with us, is not using a judgment, not saying, "Oh, this guy's never going to get it, I'm just going to lay it out for him." Is he's saying, "Okay, I'm going to get curious with you, Justin, Dr. Justin. What are you going to do about that?" I think Christ did that all the time, where he would ask questions to people that were coming to inquire about things. "What do I do?" And he'd just fire a question back and say, "Yeah, think about this." I think that's really interesting that we.
And what if there's no wrong answer if done in faith?
Yeah.
Right. Like, what are you going to do? And he's like, "You know what? I was thinking about this." Like, yeah. Go.
I've thought about that. I've thought about missionaries that are all like, "Well, how will I know what I'm supposed to promise somebody?" And I think sometimes whatever you promise, Heavenly Father goes, "Yep, that's great."
I always think of Brother of Jared.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah,
I thought this through, and he's like, "Well, I've got these rocks, right? Like, how about this? I got rocks." And he's like, "Okay, we'll do that's what we'll work with." Right.
Yeah. Interesting answer, but yeah, I can work with that because I can do anything.
Yeah, you thought it out. You put in the effort. This is what you came up with. Let's work with that.
But by golly, do something, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think again, we just go to that. Where do you want to be in 10 years? Do something about it daily for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's that Atomic Habits thought, right? I mean, I think it's so important. Simon Sinek has this really cool video, and he talks about going to the gym. You don't go to the gym for 9 hours and get in shape. But if you go to the gym for 20 minutes every day, I guarantee you'll get in shape. I can't say when, right? Yeah. But I guarantee you, if you play long game, it will happen. Yeah. And I think so many times I'm like that spiritually, right? It's like, okay, well, man, I haven't read the scriptures in a little bit. I'm just going to block out a whole bunch of time. It's like, this doesn't work. You don't get the effect of like, oh man, I'm just going to lock myself and I'm going to read the Book of Mormon for the weekend. Like, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
I went to education week. I'm good.
Yeah, right. It's about running just run it, right? Run that program, but is something in our daily routine. Lester Gray talked about that daily routine, right? And how he's tackling those different domains of his life on a daily basis. Here, not crazy amount of time, but every day he's touching those domains, and those domains are being developed. And over time, he's going to be in a totally different place. And actually, I've gone to, like, after our conversation with Lester, is like, I've got a list of things that I try to do every day with that in mind. If you looked at my list is trying to touch on the different domains of who I am, so that we'll have that balanced development.
I love that.
Yeah, I think it's powerful.
Good stuff.
Tyler, I feel like we interrupted you like 20 minutes ago and we went off on this crazy tangent and you were going to ask a question. I apologize.
Yeah, I appreciate the apology because that question is so far gone. So far gone. But I think it was supplanted by some pretty good discussion. So
Sure.
I'm okay with that.
Well, I mean, I think if I remember correctly, where you were kind of going is it's been a while since we've talked. You've had a lot of opportunities to talk to a lot of incredible people in the last little bit.
Brian. Yes.
And maybe let's talk about some of the things.
Yeah. Is there anything that's standing out to you from those conversations?
There are a couple of specific things. But there was kind of just like an overarching thing that comes to my realization every once in a while as I'm listening to people that you interact with. And so I wrote down, the richest man in town isn't a mold. It's not a conveyor belt. This isn't a get on here, we'll show you what to do, and by the end of it, we all look the same, we all sound the same, we all act the same. There is such variety in Rich. And I love, and maybe you two can speak to that and what you've been able to recognize. But I see that, man, some of your guests are rich in simplicity, in just being able to take things and understand them in a very simple manner. Some of them are rich. I think about Mike, your brother, who talked about a whole different way of living that sounds pretty dang rich to me. Some people are financially rich. Some people are relationship. They're very rich in their relationships. So maybe, yeah. What have you guys learned about that variety in the definition rich?
But I want to throw out there again, kind of going to your hold them both. Some are rich and broken.
Yeah.
Right. Some are rich and sad.
Can I say something to that really quick? The last few days for me have been rough mentally, just in a place where, I don't enjoy, I don't like. And so there was a twinge when I received the text, hey, do you want to come on the pod? And me go, I really like, if they had a camera and watched me for the last 48, 72 hours, they very much would have been like, yeah, he's not in a good place to be coming on and doing this right now. And so I think there's a lot to that, those are not mutually exclusive. You're either rich or you're broken. Those very much often are together.
I think, Brian, I honestly feel like they are always together.
Always.
And I think that one of the things that our guests have taught me is that to be intentional about finding the richness in the brokenness, right? And I think that's that's important. You talked about struggle and the importance of struggle to be able to learn. I think for us to be able to feel or recognize that richness, even if it's glimpses of it, it's because we've been through some difficult things. Now, everybody's going to have a varying level of what that looks like, but it's all relative, right? I mean, what I can bear is certainly not as much as what someone else can bear, right? And so it's gonna look different for everybody. I always have this ever since we've been doing this podcast, I've had this vision in my head of like a painting, right? And it's people walking down a path to get to this final destination. And as I've been doing this podcast, like that painting looks like hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of paths that people have walked to get to this destination. And I love the idea that we all have different experiences. We all see things through a different lens. We all feel things differently, but ultimately we're all pushing for that same thing. Right. And one of the, Mike and I talk about this a lot is that, we sit down with some guests that come from some very different backgrounds than we do. And I always in the podcast feeling like, man, we are lockstep. We're one and the same, you know, and regardless of what our backgrounds look like. So I love that idea that, you know, I do feel like brokenness and richness are always together.
Yeah, and I think we always talk to our guests about this ability, you know, it kind of ease their concerns about coming on to an international podcast like ours, Tyler.
Huge international podcast.
Is this idea that we roll out of bed rich, right? Or
Yeah.
the folks that if we've tapped you and said, come on the program, we've seen something in your life that we need in ours. And it's really just about rolling out of bed and talking to us about, walk us through it, right? What does that path look like? And I think that what I've learned, or what I've had kind of emphasized in my interactions with guests on the show, is that we don't roll out of bed and think today my life's going to change. We don't walk through our day and all of a sudden come to a fork in the road and the path to the right is highlighted in pink saying, take this one, right? This is the one, right? Or we don't see things necessarily like, ooh, that's a very dangerous choice. We're just trying.
Yeah.
We're trying to do the right thing. And sometimes we fall woefully short. But I can tell you without a doubt, 140 episodes in, however many guests, nobody has gotten to this place talking about their rich life and said, nobody helped me.
Absolutely.
That nobody helped me along the way. And to a person, everybody says, that person doesn't even know they helped me.
Yeah.
And that to me is a beautiful design element to this life.
Yeah.
Right. So we started earlier talking about parents trying to change their kids' lives by setting a stage and intentionally teaching a lesson. And the kids are like, whatever. Right. I think so many times, it's a conversation on the couch. It's a hug. It's a, hey, this book helped change me, might help you. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that to me is a beautiful common denominator.
Yeah.
And that gives me hope, right? Because every time we talk about these hundreds of paths, Tyler, you and I and Brian, tomorrow we're going to wake up and we're going to go live our lives and we're going to have probably 100 interactions.
Yeah.
And the idea that there might be magic in some of those interactions to bring about change to somebody that might be struggling, that'll get you out of bed, right?
Yeah.
That'll get you out of bed in the morning and think, hey, I might be struggling, right? Because Brian, I'm with you, right? I'm with you. Today I came home and I don't know if you guys have ever screwed up, right? Today I screwed up. I screwed up and I don't like that feeling. I don't really consider that a common feeling, but I screwed up and the consequence is some trust lost. And that's the worst kind, right? Because now I'm going to be down and I'm going to have to do some work consistently over time. And an I'm sorry doesn't bring back all the trust I had with that individual, right? So like we screw up. Some days we're on the bull, the chute opens and we know what we're doing and we ride it 8 seconds. And some days that chute opens and we're on our keister in a second, right? And I just think it's really important that if we are in the struggle, part of the magic of getting through that struggle is maybe, just maybe, I can help somebody. I can help somebody else.
Yeah,
I
I agree. I think, we throw that phrase around, it takes a village, right? When we talk about our kids, we'll say, it takes a village. We got to have good people in our kids' lives to help, but man, I feel that same way for myself. That's what this podcast really has been. It's like, how do, I'm knocking on the doors of the village, trying to figure out who's going to be the one to walk. Right. I mean, that's the fun. That's the fun of it. So, and it's, you talk about different experiences and I think about Lester Young, right? We have Lester on the show and he's in prison life in prison, and now he's changing people's lives, right? What a miraculous journey. And I just think, man, we all take different paths, but we're all striving for the same thing. And
yeah,
that's
I think of
fun.
our recent conversation, Brian, you shared your struggles, and I appreciate you kind of letting us in on that. I think of Kiefer.
Yeah.
Our recent conversation with Kiefer Marino, where his wife said, who can you talk to?
Yeah.
Right. Guys, for whatever reason, I don't know where we get this thing, but there's this idea that like, I'm good. Right. I don't need to talk to anybody. And if and I'm not saying it's just a guy thing, but if there's somebody listening right now that feels like they've got something that they're carrying, talk to somebody. Just pull somebody aside and say, can I yak at you for a second? And can I let you in? I don't need to let you all in, maybe necessarily. If it's spiritual matters, we want to invite you to find some spiritual help and put it all out there. Put it all out there. But so many times we just think, I got this. And Tyler, we've even talked about this dichotomy of like, we're busy helping other people. And then they're like, hey, are you okay? And you're like, oh, yeah. I'm good. Right.
Yeah.
We're not.
You know what isolation does? It's like us pouring Miracle Grow on the weeds and just saying, go. You know what I mean? Isolation just takes any of those small little things that we have in our head, either negative about ourselves or about a situation, and it pours gasoline on the fire, you know? And so I think that's huge. And one cool thing that I've been fortunate to do in our workspace is I've introduced a program where we have sit down conversations one-on-one with all of our employees. And we just check in and say, how are you? Not with your tasks. How are you? I'm not coming in to check in and make sure you're doing your job, but is this job doing what it needs to do for you? Are you in a place where you're getting what you need? Do you feel like you're getting the communication you need to accomplish a job? Do you have all the resources you need? How are you mentally? How is this your work-life harmony? How is that working out for you? And, you know, it was really interesting because we just started a couple weeks ago where I sat down for our first initial meeting with everybody. So for a whole week, every 45 minutes, I was sitting down with somebody new and just kind of talking about what this program was going to look like. And then just saying, hey, floor is yours. Talk to me. How is your life here in our workplace? And it's really, really interesting how the genesis of this program came because we started to see so many people leaving our organization, and we started having conversations with them very intentionally saying, hey, talk us through your thought process of how you went here. And, you know, we got some pretty candid responses about, you know, well, this situation happened. I was really put off by it. I started looking for a job. I found something that pays me more and all that kind of stuff. And, oh, well, when that thing happened, who'd you go and talk to about it? Well, nobody. A lot of times we just don't have that pressure release valve that allows us to talk through a problem, to talk through something that's hard, and to have somebody again, mourn with you, sit down and just say, yeah, that does suck. That is hard. Like, maybe I have advice, maybe I don't, but now you have somebody sharing that burden with you.
Yeah.
Well, nothing says you can say, right? You can say all you want. You can have a vision or a mission statement on the wall that says you care about people, but nothing says you care about people like sitting down and saying, hey, talk to me. Right. And as you do that consistently and with reliability, you'll start to see the fruit. Right. Initially, they'll be like, what is this? And they'll probably be like, I'm going to let this flavor of the month pass by and this thing's going to pass. Right. I'm not so sure if I want to necessarily just kind of let you in on stuff. But over time, once that is established, it's like, yeah, I'll let you in. This is what I'm dealing with. Right. And I think that's important. That's that idea of, look, we're going to walk it. We say it's important. We're gonna take time, and we're gonna make sure that you feel seen, right? That you feel a sense of belonging. Yeah, I even think of guests that have talked about making sure that they see their kids eye to eye and have those conversations, from time to time, talking to them and leaving no assumptions that everything's okay.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
And you know what the best, what I've heard is the best way to do that even is to sterilize that situation as little as possible, to be doing something, to be in the middle of life, to be doing an activity that they enjoy, and just say, hey, how are you doing? How's life? What are you thinking about?
You want to talk about boys or the galaxy?
Yeah, all that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? Yeah, I think too often we think, okay, I'm going to schedule this meeting, sit down on the couch in a very kind of like almost like an interrogation, almost like an interview, instead of, hey, I care about you. This is organic. We're playing Mario Kart. What's up?
Oh yeah, there was a lot of games of catch where those kind of discussions were taking place.
Yeah,
I was talking to somebody whose life, they just made a significant life change and really made faith a priority in their life. And talking to the person, like, where did this come from? It was, I walked with a couple of women and I wanted what they seemed to have in their life.
Wow,
and I didn't have it.
That's
right.
cool.
Not a formal,
yeah,
it's not a formal church activity. It's just hey, you want to go walk and talk? Because we're dealing with some stuff. And they saw how the women dealt with stuff.
Yeah.
Right. Proactively, faithfully, but dealt with stuff. Dirty, rolled up their sleeves, and like, we're working through life's challenges. And she wanted what they had. And I think it's that we overthink things a little bit sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know how many sermons on service I've heard and forgotten, and how I'll never forget when I was in high school, we had a big fire on the mountain that we lived on, and we were evacuated for 2 weeks. And part of it was during Halloween, and the local community that we were in, not a super close knit community to where we were at, came and they heard that there were evacuees from the mountain that were posted up in this campsite over here, and they did reverse trick-or-treating, and they came and brought us a ton of candy.
That's awesome.
I'll never forget that.
Yeah.
Because that was action. That's imprinted on me now.
Yeah.
Where words are great, but it's in those organic moments where we go, this is an opportunity, let's take it.
Oh man,
we have big things.
That resonates so well with me, because I mean, my concern is the tombstone will read, "Here lies Mike Freeman, all talk." Right? Like, all talk. Like, man, that would be the worst, right? Like, get out there, and what does your passion lead you to do? What actions do you feel compelled to do? And there is, when it comes from that love, when it comes from that place, you can't do wrong, right? You may not have the words, like, how am I going to show up to that person who lost somebody? How am I going to show up to that person that's struggling with this thing? Just show up. Just show up.
100%.
Somebody's face came to my mind just as we were talking about that, Brian. So thank you for that. I'm gonna reach out and visit that person.
Can I hit you guys with another one?
Yeah.
That kind of piggybacks on that, because there's times where I listen to people and I go, well, I disagree with what they said or things like that. And so I wrote down, disagreement isn't an indictment. I'm sure there's probably things that you've heard from people bring up. There's probably things that I've said that people are like, I'm not sure about that. But disagreement isn't an indictment saying, oh, the way that you're living, that's not rich. That is very much rich for you. And we're all so different in our personalities and our habits and our mental makeup and all those different things that I think the variety and seeing just how many ways there are to be rich has really helped me say, oh, I find what's rich. Like I don't have to find the definition and then work towards that. I just have to start searching in myself, like all these folks that they're interviewing have done, and find rich here, find rich inside, find rich. And just because I'm not doing it the way you do it doesn't mean I'm like, you did it wrong.
Yeah.
I'm doing it right. So I think that's there's a bigger conversation there. I just think, disagreement is not an indictment of the way you're doing things.
You know what? I've had a few moments like this in some of our conversation on the podcast. And I got to tell you, I like this moment where, and Mike, I know you and I've had this conversation where I've said, I've changed my mind about some things, right? I've changed my mind about some things. I love that. I love that too, feeling. Man. Yeah, absolutely. It's almost like, because there's things that I think I want to have a black and white definition to. And when I'm in a conversation with someone, I just love that feeling of being able to say, you know what? I didn't even know this was an angle I could look at this at. And my ideas are different. Maybe I still don't totally agree, or maybe, but my ideas are different. And I love I hope that people, when they have conversations with me, will feel that like Tyler's going to listen, and he's open-minded. He's going to hear it. And, his mind may be up today, may be made up today, but I'm willing to take other ideas and absorb those.
We've talked about this in the context of Brian's comment, hold both, right?
Absolutely.
I think this idea of like, what you're holding, hold it. But when something else comes along and it's better and it lines up, we know what truth feels like, right? And I need to make sure that I want to make sure that folks listening, Mike Freeman believes that truth is independent.
For sure.
Right? That there is truth out there, and that is independent of opinion. It doesn't need a majority poll. It doesn't need those things. But when I come across it and I know what it feels like, put down what you had and pick up that thing, right? Because that's a true principle. And we've had places, and I love, there's a certain person, there's a certain brain, there's a certain something. When I sit down with people that are different with me, I love the way my brain feels, making new connections and looking at those things in new angles. Tyler, we're in this interesting place where we're about to send kids on missions, right? Yeah. We're about to send them out. They're going to wear a name tag and represent the Savior. And they're going to be in this business of talking to people that they'll probably disagree with.
Yeah.
Right. And I shared with my son, my boy's heading out. I shared with my son. I remember flying to Uruguay to serve my mission. And I remember flying into Sao Paulo at night, capital of Brazil, at the time, one of the world's largest cities. And I remember at night looking out the window of that airplane, and I remember seeing those lights. And I remember having this conviction in my heart and this feeling out of love for people. I wanted every light to know what I knew. Right? That's an ambitious young missionary, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. But I know what I know because I've had a fingerprint-like unique package of experiences.
Yeah.
That have led me to know what I know. And the beautiful thing about conversations in this podcast and conversations everywhere where there might be disagreement is acknowledging my package of experiences is not the same as the person I'm interacting with. Their experience, we carry it, right? It impresses on us and it helps us make sense of the world around us. It helps us get through hard times. I am not going to, by disagreeing with them, I am not discrediting their experience at all.
And I think Mike, and I mean, I feel like in the conversation or having the conversation allows us to say, to find the similarity in the differences. And I think there are similarities in the differences, right? Like we can be so focused on this is why I'm right and this is why you're wrong, as opposed to where are we matching up on this?
Can you talk to Abe Freeman right now? Because like that to me is perfect, right? Can you go in, and I love that idea, almost like a lens.
Yeah.
Can you go in and just look for commonalities?
Yeah.
Oh, you love your family? I love my family, right?
Yeah.
I can trace back so many conversations on my mission to, we were both saying the same thing, but for some reason we were at each other's throats about it. Different vernacular, different source material, like whatever it was. I can vividly remember conversations that I had where we were both saying the same thing. And if we took the time to do that and say, oh yeah, we're kind of saying the same thing, right?
Right. Yeah.
That wouldn't have happened. That contention wouldn't have entered into that interaction.
Yeah.
The conversations I'm having with my son is like, look, don't talk about an end, right? Jesus teaches more blessed are ye. That anywhere you see in the scriptures where Jesus says, blessed are ye and more blessed are, this group is blessed and more blessed is this group, that might be something cool to learn, right? And in the Book of Mormon, when he's talking to his disciples and he's talking to the 9 and the 3, he's like, hey, what do you want? And those 3 are like, I don't want this thing to end. And he's like, more blessed are you. And it's like, how cool, Abe Freeman, for you to go and just like, it's not about an end date. And then there's this idea of going and living, right? There's this great piece in the Book of Mormon where Ammon lands among the people, and he's just like, and the king's like, hey, you gonna live here? And he's like, yeah, I'm gonna dwell here, and heck, I might just be here till I die. Right? Like, I love like be where you are. Yeah. Love that. Love those people. Don't be expecting your conditions or situations to change. That's George Bailey, right? That's so richest men in town. Love where you are. Take care of your own grass. Who cares what the neighbor's grass looks like, right? Don't be dependent on your situation to change for your happiness to change. It's not gonna happen.
I think differences, honestly, it's like, it's you're not willing to look at that different point of view. And I think that's such a big, that makes such a big difference. I mean,
and why do you think that is?
Well, because we want to be right. We want to be right. Right. I mean, and it feels good when we can walk away and go, darn it, I was right. But it feels
well, get ready for married life, man, because you're never right.
Yeah, it feels better when we can say, shoot, we were really looking at this at different angles, but it turns out, like you said, Brian, we're kind of saying the same thing at the end of it. I mean, and honestly, I go back to what I said earlier. I love that feeling where I've said this to you, Mike, before. Shoot, I was wrong about some things, and I'm ready.
I've seen your face mid-conversation on this podcast.
Yeah.
And I know you've seen mine. Like,
yeah.
Oh man, you're right. You mentioned Rachel. You mentioned some of the conversations. Like, oh wow.
Yeah.
And it's not like I land in a place where it's like, and now I have the answer. A lot of those times where it's like I'm wrong is like, okay, well, I know that's wrong. I'm going to pick it. I'm going to put it down, and I'm going to walk around and have this question in my heart for a little bit.
And that's sometimes, just real quick, it's not even saying, that what I believed before was wrong. It might be saying what I heard this other person say added to what I believed, right? And I think that's been a lot of my experience in conversations in this podcast is, well, I had this belief and this person said something different, and that just enhanced and added to my belief, right? And so I just love that feeling. So sorry to cut you off, Brian.
No, that you're perfect. Yeah, I think that it's really important for us to be able to trace back where did I get this belief? Where does it come from? Is it because the world we live in today, there's statistics out there about how many advertisements we see a day. The average person sees 4,000 to 10,000 advertisements a day or something like that. And that's trying to sell you something. But even outside of that, all the content that we are exposed to now, you can have a constant stream, and whatever is coming upstream is going to land in here, what's downstream. And you can start to build all these big things, these beliefs from all these things that have come even kind of subconsciously. And so if we don't take the time, a lot of the time, to take something that's in our head and go, why do I hold this belief? Especially the ones that we're like willing to go at it over, if we don't examine, where did I pick this up? Because sometimes there have been times where I'm like, no, I know this thing is right. And I in my mind, I'm like, I have scriptural evidence to back this up. Right, and then I go back and I read the scripture and I go, oh, that did not mean what I thought it meant. I have a little more life experience now. And that is very much different than from when I was a 19-year-old missionary. I have a very different understanding. I have a very different experience than that kid did. And so I think it's important for us to be willing to do that, because I think there's a lot of times I hear people yelling and arguing and complaining and don't have the curiosity to go back and say, where did I pick this up at? And what's reality? Is there something that can help me round this out? Because if you're seeking for that truth, if that's what you're moving toward, then that process of getting to it is only going to refine you into having beliefs that are more solid, that you have a foundation to stand on, and not these sandy things that a lot of the time we keep in our heads and we fight vehemently for them. And someday we're going to face a savior and he's going to go, yeah, that thing you could have let go a long time ago.
Yeah. Well, and can we, all this talk of pick up and let go, I just want to clarify and make sure that at least I think we're on the record by saying, in that process of going upstream and looking at how do I know or why do I believe that thing, if God has been there, don't put it down.
Well, yeah, and I think,
right?
Mike,
like
that
if
goes
you've
back
had
to
those
that.
experiences, don't discard those.
I think that I appreciate that clarification, because I think that if we're judging things through the right, I'll say lens, but if we're listening to the Spirit or revelation as it occurs to us, and we're measuring things through that, I think that's our space, right? That's where we're going to be able to say, hey, this is a good thing. And maybe, I the same thing applies when we say, oh shoot, I was a little too hard and fast on that one, right? And I think I need to let go of that a little bit. But it's interesting because I don't
want to make an assumption.
Yeah.
I don't want to make an assumption that everybody, and I know I'm not saying I know how God talks to me, therefore, listen to me. But check out Galatians 5:22-23, right? Fruits of the Spirit. If somebody's wondering, what are we talking about? Check that out, because that's how God talks to us, right? Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. You go through that checklist, right? And you can, I have this conversation every other week with a group of 16 and 17-year-old kids. How many have felt this? Okay. All right, good. How many, right? And we just kind of get in that routine of saying, okay, so this is, if I feel this is what we're talking about. But Brian, I would give you a shout out, because I was having a conversation the other day with somebody and I brought up ruts versus grooves. And it was a mind blower, man. It was I just saw it like, bah! And I was like, you got to go back and listen to Brian grow, because
so fun. Yeah. I'm that's a thing that's regularly in my head as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can on that last subject, I think I probably have shared this story, but it just came up again. It's a memorable story for me, and it teaches a powerful lesson. I have a coworker bought a house in October, and the backyard was completely brown, right? She starts stripping it out, clearing it out, time, resources, money, dumps it, spends the whole month of October and into November redesigning and rebuilding this brown, crappy backyard. Come January, February, one of the neighbors is a brand new house, or not a new house to her, and she comes in and destroys the backyard. And January, February, a neighbor comes by and says, "Oh my goodness, I can't wait for the spring. Your yard is so beautiful." And she's like, "What are you talking about?" And the neighbor brings a picture of what the backyard looks like in the spring.
After the one that she tore out?
And it was one of those like garden tours where people would come and check out the house every spring. And she bought the house in October and saw brown and said, this is garbage. I got to make some changes. Right. So sometimes in this picking up and putting down, man, stay with some things for a season as we feel that we need to, because in different seasons, it takes on something different.
And
because this is a struggle process. This isn't an automated process.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I think too, there's some fundamental truths that we have to have established for ourselves. Right. And I think that those are foundational, and what we don't want to do is chip away at that foundation. Right. So I think that differences in discussion and conversation, I mean, these are important, and we need to have them, if for nothing else, to understand each other better. But there's an opportunity to add to our foundation, right? But we have to be discerning in that process as well. There's things that we have to be willing to say, whether it's things that we're holding on to or things that are being presented to us, and we have to be willing to make some judgments on those things and go, this thing's not gonna put me in a better spot.
Yeah, and in those 4,000 or 10,000, whatever bombardment we're under in this world right now, so much of that is aimed at worth.
Yeah.
Right. And
100%,
anything that is taking down our idea of what we are worth, drop it immediately. Right.
Yeah.
Drop that
absolutely.
immediately, because that is one of the battlefields, right? That idea of who am I to, let me tell you who you are.
Yeah.
Right. Read what Jesus did. That's who you are.
Well, yeah, I
That's
think
who he did that for.
100%. And we've talked a lot about the idea of identity and the importance of having a sense of identity, right? And I mean, I talk to my kids about this all the time. I'm like, there's all kinds of labels that we can throw on each other and that we want to give each other, but the most important one is sons and daughters of God, right?
Yeah.
If that's
that
the
label.
measurement, right? That's the label that we're really worried about. All this other stuff is going to be,
because the world is going to count. We dropped Galatians 5 for how to do it right.
Right.
How to do it wrong. Just watch Potter's Exchange with George Bailey and It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah.
When he comes to the desk and he offers him.
Yeah. Right.
This idea of, hey, George, you're not enough who you are right now. You need trips to Europe. You need money. You need this. You need this. You need the nicest house in town. All of those things. And for a second, it almost works.
Yeah.
Right. Because those are pretty seductive voices. I think it's interesting. We started this conversation talking about stuff.
Yeah.
And the world would say you plus stuff increases your worth. And that is not the message, right?
Yeah.
That is not a message that God is sending. If anything, it's like, hey, strip away this stuff so I can get into your life, because if we own stuff owns us, right? Says the guy that's got a full garage.
And a side yard.
So we're working on something.
Can I tell you guys an interesting experiment I did for myself recently? One day I just opened up a Word document and I just started writing, and this was the prompt that I gave myself. Here's what my life would look like if everything I didn't want to happen happened. Because I think it's really easier for us to, So just hold on for a second here.
Whoa.
So I think it's so easy for us to come up with everything on the spot for, I don't want this to happen. I don't want that to happen. And so I wrote down a pretty robust couple pages here of, all sorts of things. How my health would be, what I look like physically, my mental state, my relationship. I talk about money and finances. I talk about what brings, I don't have enjoyment in life. I I don't have the ability to recharge. Like, I talked about all these negative things. All I did after that was I copied and pasted and went and looked at every negative thing and tried to just do the antonym, find the antonym for that thing. And it turned out like, I'll read you a tiny little bit of what it changed into. So this is the beginning. Looking at my reflection in the mirror, I don't recognize myself. You flip that and you say, looking at the reflection in the mirror, I fully recognize the person in front of me. So you just take all those negative things that you say, I don't want this to happen in my life, and then turn it on its head. And then all of a sudden you read that and you're just like pumped about this life that you have. You put it on its head, you put it on the inverse, and you have this picture of like an idyllic life, like the life that any of us would be happy to have. And so I like, when I read the negative part, I kind of welled up. Like I felt, I put some hearts, some tears were shed as I was writing through all those things. Cause in some of those ways, I'm like, some of those things are pretty close to reality. But then reading the other, like just taking everything that I don't want and reversing it, like just gave me so much hope, like gave me just this picture of, that's the feeling I want. That's what I want to be permeating in my life. That's the relationship I want to have with my spouse. That's the relationship I want to have with my kids. It was a pretty interesting and powerful exercise that I think would be kind of fun if everybody did for their own sake.
Yeah.
And we can spin off of that, right? Because we had 2 guests in recent episodes that hit worst case scenario.
Right.
And it actually fueled them, right?
Mhm.
They hit bottom and realized the worst has happened and I'm alive. And all fear went away. And they ended up, supercharged rebound. And I think that's a powerful place, as long as you make sure you do the second part of that exercise.
Right. Oh,
and
yeah.
you make sure that you revisit those things. I think.
Well, the easy part about it is you just have to read all the negative and just find the words, the opposite words, and then you read through it and you're just like, whoa, that's amazing.
I mean,
that would be amazing.
that's a cool exercise. I think that I think, and I have this conversation with my youngest all the time. It's like the idea of nurturing the ability to find the positive in a tough spot, right? And I mean, I'm not good at it. It's something I want to be really good at, but I think that, I go back to Dr. Justin just sitting on a bench with $5 to his name and somebody picking up the phone and talking in French and him going, oh shoot, I know French, right? Next thing you know, he's got a place to live. I mean, it's just,
don't let that man sleep on the street.
No, he's too important. I mean, and honestly, that is something that we should all be, that's a phrase we should all just be repeating in our head all the time. Like, I'm too important, right? Because that's the reality. But I think that, going back to that exercise, I think the ability to find the opposite of those things is a big deal. And I like the idea, having it written out. It gives you that kind of visual cue to say, yeah, what's the opposite thing of this, rather than wallowing in those things, because that's easy to do. That's really easy to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's key to do that second part.
Please
don't stop at the first.
Here's kind of a, we talk about unlocking keys to the universe or wisdom keys or whatever. That idea of, you increase the intentionality with which you're living your life by doing some of those kinds of activities and just stopping the whirlwind, stopping the hamster wheel and saying, can I just sit with me for a minute? Open up a laptop, open up a Google Doc, right? We've had so many people talk about the Notes app on their phone, right? Like, yeah. Can we just live a little bit? Can we turn up that intentionality? And when we do, it's almost like Alma 32 and giving space, experimenting on the word, right?
Yeah.
We do those things and just watch miracles happen, right? And I think there's a force at play. It's interesting. I had spent some time at the beach hanging out. And the interesting thing, I'm reading on the beach, I'm reading some fiction about a lighthouse keeper, right? Light Between Two Oceans. Whew, powerful book. So I'm reading about this lighthouse that is a fixture that isn't moving, right? Put the book down, jump into the ocean with my kids, and I can't hold ground when waves come. Right. And as I'm in the ocean with my kids and waves are coming and I'm trying to hold my, hey, let's just like not try to move. And you can't, right? You get moved. And the thought comes to you, there are forces in this world that are trying to move men and women.
Mm-hmm.
They are trying to move us. And let's not sugarcoat it. Let's call it what it is. Let's reject him, right? And let's build on that foundation so that we can't be moved from our place, because stakes are high.
Love that. Yeah.
Stakes are high.
I love it. So I gotta say, like, I mean, it's already been a couple hours, Brian, and that's the weird thing. I mean, it doesn't seem like it, but I was just thinking as Mike was talking about the final question that we always ask here about what it means to be the richest man in town. And I just want to throw it out there for me. And that answer is so long and it's so complex and there's so much that goes into it. But part of that for me is being able to have these types of conversations with guys like you. So much appreciated for the great thoughts, Brian. It's always fun. I love it.
Sounds like our timing was pretty good too, Brian.
It definitely was.
Reaching
Absolutely.
out to you sounded like a good timing for you to come on in and chat.
Good thing we didn't have that camera, and we wouldn't have backtracked, right? But hey, so let me just ask this, and we've answered that question before, but Mike, add something to that question for me tonight, would you? What does it mean to you to be considered the richest man in town? And Brian, think about that. I want you to wrap us up with that.
Man, like you said, I love that idea of added to, and I feel like I've been in a place where I've had conversations that have changed me. And Brian, you live in that, right? Your experiences have added to me. I think that for me, I'm going to go with bunker. Like just that idea of palms up, just that idea of like, nothing I can do is going to change how much God loves me. He's going to give and he's going to take. And can I, with gratitude, receive? And can with gratitude sacrifice? And I think to me, as long as I do that, and I'm not shaking a fist, I'm not resentful, I keep that heart soft, I think to me, that's a rich life. We've had experiences with so many people that have gone through unimaginable. You mentioned Dr. Justin, unimaginable. And the idea that they can have a heart full of gratitude, to me, like, okay, that's what I want. So I'm going to accept, right? And I know that there's going to be seasons, and I'm going to enjoy every season in bounty, in famine, right? And I'm going to have it with a soft heart. I'm going to keep that dang heart soft. I think to me, that's the rich life now.
Love it.
I appreciate the question, man. We dish it out.
Yeah. Might as well have to answer
We
that.
don't necessarily take it.
And I think it's so fun that we get, like, I think you guys should do that every so often, because then you get the kind of the checkup and the, you know, you measure over time how that's moved and how that's grown. And I think that's a really powerful thing to be able to say. You guys started with an idea of this whole podcast and what a rich man was, and that's evolved, I'm sure, over the course, as we've talked about tonight. When I think about richness, I think when you get to have those glimpses of how precious this life is, I think that makes you rich in a way that George Bailey very much knew and understood. You know, he understood and was shifted in his mind that no matter how bad it got for him, no matter how much he wanted to say, you know, if I end it, it'll fix things. If I'm done, it'll be over. I don't have to worry about this or that anymore. When he got to relive the life without him, when he got to relive that, and we got to see the impact that it had on the people around him, or the negative impact for the most part that it had on the people around him, that understanding of how precious life is, man, I don't think that any of us, and I think everything that I've heard people respond boils down to that, is a rich man through experiences, through conversations, through relationships, both with people here in front of us and with heaven. When you get all those things, it's reinforced in your mind how precious this opportunity is that we have, and we can do a lot with it. We can do so many things with it.
I love it. I love that question. I love those answers, man. This has been fun. You know, I always love spending some time with you, Brian. It's always insightful, and man, you bring it. You bring it. And I love it. So we appreciate you spending a couple hours with us tonight.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys. I appreciate people that listen. I appreciate people that accept your invitations to come on, because man, yeah, these are conversations I wish were had more.
Yeah,
I think it's needed. So don't just keep these words in your ears and your headphones. Like, take these questions, ask them to people in your life. It's big. It's huge.
Yeah. Well, hey, thanks for the life update, and congratulations on the good things that are happening, man. That's exciting.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
We're presidents of your fan club, so anything that we can do to help you out along the way, you know, I'm glad you're moved in, so I don't have to move your stuff. But, yeah.
Next time when you're in San Diego, if I don't get a phone call, there's going to be a problem, man.
Okay.
There's going to be a problem. All right.
Got it. You know, I was sweating this presentation.
And he knows people.
Yeah.
He knows people.
That's right. So, hey, look, we appreciate you, Brian. We love you. And until next time, my friend.
Good idea, Ernie. A toast to my big brother, George, the richest man in town.